All right, today we're going to dive into the fragile and honestly pretty fascinating world of islands.
Now, I know that sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But the answer, well, it actually tells a powerful story about our planet's most unique ecosystems and, our very complicated role inside of them.
Okay, so let's get right into it. What makes an island more than just, a chunk of land in the middle of the ocean? Well, as we're about to see, that isolation is both this incredible creative force and a really critical weakness.
Yeah, think about it. You cut a place off from the rest of the world for thousands, even millions of years, and they basically become these amazing natural laboratories. Life just does its own thing. It evolves in some really remarkable and, frankly, sometimes bizarre ways. You end up with species you just won't find anywhere else on Earth.
And this leads to a super interesting phenomenon that scientists call Foster's rule, or the island rule. The idea is simple. If you're a big animal on an island with limited food, like those ancient mammoths, you tend to shrink over generations. But if you're a small creature with fewer predators hunting you, you can get surprisingly big. It's almost like evolution is just playing with the size dial, turning it up or down to fit the island.
But, and this is a big but, there's a huge catch to all this unique evolution. These island species are often, well, a bit naive. They just haven't had to evolve defenses against the tough predators or the diseases you'd find on the continents. They're these hyper-specialized creatures living in a bubble, and that bubble is about to be popped by invaders.
And look, this vulnerability, it isn't just some abstract theory. It is a harsh reality, and it's perfectly tragically illustrated by the story of one of the world's rarest birds. So meet the Seychelles magpie robin. It's this beautiful, glossy black bird that for ages was all over the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean. I mean, for centuries, it was just a normal part of the scenery.
But just take a look at this timeline. Back in the 1800s, they were everywhere. Then, the population just crashed. By 1970, only 16 birds were left on the entire planet. 16. 20 years later, in 1990, they'd only managed to get up to 21. We're talking about a species that was literally a few heartbeats away from being gone for good.
So, what on earth happened? Well, the answer, tragically, came on boats. Humans brought invasive species with them, things like rats and cats. Now for the magpie robin, which had never, ever had to deal with predators this clever, it was an absolute catastrophe. Their defenses were basically zero.
But this is where the story gets really wild. The very same species that caused all this devastation, yep, that's us, also became the bird's one and only hope for survival.
So, starting right there in 1990, a huge conservation effort kicked off. I mean, this was an intensive rescue mission. They started carefully capturing the handful of birds that were left and moving them, sometimes by helicopter, to other islands that had been completely cleared of those predators. And the result? It was incredible. By 2012, the population had bounced back to over 240 birds. It's seriously one of the greatest comeback stories in conservation, pulling an entire species back from the absolute brink. This whole story just brilliantly shows what's possible, right? The potential we have for a positive impact. But that impact isn't always about these dramatic, last-minute rescue missions. Sometimes it can take other, even more surprising forms. And to see just how wild these relationships can get, let's head down to the coast of Brazil. Because for more than 150 years, local fishers there have had this unbelievable partnership with wild bottlenose dolphins. Okay, get this. Here's how it works. The dolphins actually herd schools of fish toward the shore, right to where the fishers are waiting. Then one of the dolphins gives a specific signal. It could be a deep dive or a slap of its tail on the water, and that is the cue. The fishers know, throw the nets now.
And check out the benefits, because this is not charity. The fishers who work with the dolphins are 17 times more likely to catch fish. 17! And the dolphins, they get a 13% higher survival rate, probably because they get to snack on all the fish that get confused by the nets. It's a total win-win, a true partnership.
So you've got these stories, right? One of near extinction, one of a dramatic rescue, and another of incredible cooperation. All of them really force us to step back and think about our place in all of this, our responsibility to the rest of the natural world. There's this idea that's really gaining traction called one welfare, and it's actually pretty simple, but also really profound. It says you just can't separate human well-being from animal well-being and the health of the environment. It's all connected. They're all pieces of the exact same puzzle.
And this one welfare idea is often built on something called the 5 freedoms.
Basically, it's a framework that says, at a bare minimum, we owe animals a few things. Freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort and pain, but also freedom from fear and distress. You know, exactly what those magpie robins were facing. And maybe most interesting, the freedom to express their normal natural behaviors, like those amazing dolphins working with the fishers. It's really the baseline for how we should act.
Which brings us to a final thought, and it comes from, of all people, the guy who created Winnie the Pooh. The stories we've heard today about the robin and the dolphins, they show us exactly what happens when we fail to listen and what can happen when we finally start to. So I guess the question to leave you with is this. Are we just talking at the animal world, or are we finally, truly beginning to listen?